This video is sponsored by the following people. Please click the links in the description below.
Oh, I'm just finishing it. So we're going to switch over to the gas forge now. Basically just less time spent heating up, less focus on the temperature of the knife. Gas forge, you just set it up and forget about it, and it takes the metal up to one temperature, which is much better for batch work. It's the bladesmith's friend, really. It is much noisier though. Quite used to shouting over the forge. Once I taught, I think it was 8 classes in a row, so 8 days in a row, and by the end my voice was so gone. Obviously this one's going to take a little bit of time for the inside of the forge to heat up. It needs to just come up a little bit warmer. That would be kind of ready to go, but we'd just be out of heat pretty much by the time I pull it to the hammer, which needs another 100 degrees or so. Now that I've got it about a third of the way drawn out, or about a third of the material reduced, I'm going to start to focus on it in 2 halves. So I'll be working the lower side of the bevel and the upper side of the bevel separately. What I like to do is stretch the lower side, which is going to cause the knife to warp upwards, and then I'll thin the distal taper on the back side, and that's going to cause the knife to warp downwards, and I'll walk between the two, bending it up and down until it's where I want it. Right, that's pretty much ready to go. So I'm going to start by putting just the bottom half, the blade half, the bevel half of the knife, under the power hammer, with these dies pushing the material back into the heel of the knife, which should pull the heel down and push it back below the tang. I'm pushing material this way, trying to get the blade to spread over here. Right, now that I've done that, my knife is completely bent upwards. So the next step is going to be to forge on the spine to bend it back downwards. And that's also going to be establishing the distal taper. So I'll forge more by the tip to make the tip thinner than the base of the knife. Now you see it's completely bent downwards, and then I'll switch to the bevel, bend it back upwards, and so on and so forth. And you can start to see some of the distal taper here. You can see it's about 5mm thick here, maybe 3 here. I picked up this technique from some of the guys that forge mostly integrals, because it's a really good method for pushing the heel back under the bolster, which is one of the big challenges when you're forging an integral knife. Out, I mean, you can see that's considerably fatter than the rest of the blade now, so I'll start to draw that out a little bit. Just a bit of hand work to clean this tang up. That will do for now. I'll come back to that for a third session right towards the end of the blade forging. The bottom side always has all of these jagged marks on from the edges of the dies, so I'll come in and clean this profile a little bit and start to clean all of these jagged marks off with a hand hammer, and then this will pretty much be done. There's a little bit more bending down and up to do, so I want this bit to bend downwards, and I would like this bit to bend upwards a little bit more, but that can all be adjusted under the hand hammer. That was a bit of beveling to bring the tip up a little bit. Now we're pretty close to finished. I'd like to get the spine to curve a little bit more this way, and definitely another heat on the tang, and then I need to focus in on these hammer marks on the heel as well. The final stage now is just going to be to draw the tang out to its final size. That wants to taper in the opposite direction to the blade, and then to get everything straight as well. If we have any wiggles in the edge, then the core might not be centered, so that's very important. I personally am a big fan of a straight peen hammer. They're quite hard to get hold of, I think. You basically only get them if you make them yourself. They're just a lot more useful for bladesmiths, really, because we're almost always trying to make things longer instead of taller. A cross peen is nice for drawing out the heel on a knife, for example, but I don't find I actually need that very often, whereas this way I quite often want to pull things out. If you've got a bad weld, it makes a really awful clattering sound, so you can actually tell a bad weld by dropping it on the floor. So this should make like a sort of ringing noise. You can hear it vibrates, whereas this one just goes thud, because the layers aren't quite touching each other, so they vibrate against each other and kill the vibration. So if you do throw a bad weld on the floor, you can hear it, but I'm just joking. Right, I'm going to go ahead and call that a finished blank. So we've got the main features of what I've kind of done here are that we've got a nice taper on the spine. That's one of the most important parts for me. And it's a little bit thinner on the edge, which means less grinding to do. It's quite important with San Mai that you put some bevels on, because otherwise you're going to grind off basically all of the cladding. And I want as little of the cladding really ground off as possible, so that you've got as much stainless material on the knife as possible. So it's important that it tapers from roughly 5mm above the heel, roughly 2mm by the tip. If I can get that down to 1mm, sometimes I will. It's a difficult trade-off with forging San Mai because, as I said earlier, you lose a bit of the carbon into the jacket. So sometimes you think, oh, I'd rather spend the extra time to forge it closer to shape. But then other times it's, oh, I'd rather get the forging done quicker, keep more of the carbon in the core. Think about it as you go, process really. So in this case, I've got the edge down to about 1.5 mm all the way, which gives us enough core thickness that we're definitely going to be able to grind through the jacket on either side and still have core left, which is also quite important. If you forged this all the way down to 0.5 mm, you'd have real trouble finding the core when it came to the grinding. And then the profile's nearly right. There's a little bit of a lump there that I'll grind straight by taking this piece off. There's a little bit more belly than I want, so I'll just grind a little bit here. If I grind a little bit here and find out that it gets significantly thicker because of the bevels, I'll put it back in the forge for a heat or two and just thin the edge a little bit. But I think looking at this, it should be well within the dimensions that I'm looking for.
Thank you again for watching. If you'd like to watch more knife making videos, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and hit subscribe if you haven't done so. We will see you in the next knife making video.